Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 698 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our ninth book just came out. It's called From Letters to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So I want you to go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, John Lewis dedicated his life to fighting for justice, equality, and human rights. From his early activism as a student to his decades-long tenure as a respected congressman, Lewis left an invaluable mark on the struggle for racial equality and social justice in the United States. Through his commitment to nonviolent protest and his persistent pursuit of equality for all, John Lewis became synonymous with courage and perseverance. So what if I told you we had someone on the show today that was very closely connected to the same amazing human being? Detria Austin Everson is a nationally recognized leadership speaker and author and a C-suite executive with more than 20 years of experience driving organizational strategy, high-impact philanthropy, and community transformation. She most recently served as president and chief executive officer of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation in Atlanta, where she advanced initiatives focused on civil rights, civic engagement, and social justice, amplifying the legacy of Congressman John Lewis through national partnerships and youth leadership programs. She's a sought-after keynote speaker on leadership, philanthropy, and social impact. Deidre brings both executive insight and lived experience to every stage, equipping organizations to lead with clarity, purpose, and results. Deidre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Hey, I am pumped. I think the world of you, and you already know that because I told you. And you are also a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So take us back to your college years. Everybody in our audience, we need to know, why did you decide to join AKA, and how did that experience shape the woman and the leader that you became?
Oh, amazing question. A lot to unpack there, but I want to start in this way. I really want to start and open with something that you actually wrote. On page 5 of From Letters to Leaders, you write that you firmly believe our purpose in life is to give back to others. I love that. And I want to tell you where mine actually comes from. My mother, Margaret Eleanor Austin, spent her entire life doing exactly that. She was a social worker, and with my father, a restaurant owner, they never let anyone leave their table hungry. My mother took in people who needed help, and she didn't do it because she called it service. She actually just called it living. She passed away in December 2025, and my book, Serving as a Superpower, is dedicated to her. So everything I write about service, I actually watched her do. So now, as an AKA, I'm proud to say that I joined Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated while I was in graduate school through the Delta Omega Omega chapter. But my connection to AKA started much earlier in life. I was influenced by the women of Delta Omega Omega from the time I was in the second grade all the way through my senior year debutante cotillion. So when I went to Spelman College, I already understood what AKA, that it wasn't just about the letters. I saw women serving, leading, mentoring, and showing up for their communities. So when I put those letters on, I understood that I was joining the tradition of women who believe that what you have, meaning your education, your gifts, your influence, it's not for you alone. And that's what AKA reinforced for me. What you carry is meant to benefit someone else. So AKA helped me understand that leadership isn't just about the position you hold, it's about the example you leave behind. And now I'm very intentional about being the kind of woman and leader that a second grader, a college student, a professional, or might, quite frankly, anyone watching me can say, that's the kind of leader and the kind of life I want to emulate. Because ultimately, that's what service did for me. It gave me a model of leadership. And I hope that my life continues to do the same for someone else.
Wow. Well, I feel very connected to you for several reasons. I'll say, first off, I'm sorry on the loss of your mom. I lost my dad also in December of 2025. And I can tell already that the apple doesn't fall fall far from the tree in terms of your mom's dedication to service and giving back, whatever she called it. It's still giving back, and the fact that you've decided to continue that, and then also live the values of AKA means a lot. So good on you, and just I think it's incredible, and I think that is totally due to your mom and her influence on you. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's beautiful. And your new book is called Serving is Superpower, Transforming Lives Through the Power of Giving and Receiving. I absolutely love it. Resonates with me as somebody who is a fraternity member. So why did you choose the word superpower to describe service?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I hear it often. I chose the word superpower because I realize that service is one of the most powerful things we possess, but we often don't recognize it as a strength. I was speaking on a panel at a National Women's Conference in DC, and it was a great panel of a group of incredible women in philanthropy. And the audience included individuals like senior leaders, executives, emerging leaders, and women from all over the United States. And some of the women they were mentoring. At the very end of the panel, the moderator asked each of us for a final thought. And as I sat there and looked out into these faces, looking and thinking, what would I need to say that can be something they can leave with, that will not just spark inspiration, but maybe action and more purpose? And literally the words came out of my mouth. They were, serving is a superpower. And that's what I left the audience with. And I didn't think it would land, but afterwards, a woman came up to me and she said, "You gave me the words I needed to explain to my son why serving other people really matters." She said, "And that's why we should use our gift in service and not selfishness." And I thought, how amazing. She shared something that I thought what I was giving just for this audience, but she really saw that that statement could be something that could be translated into how she's trying to show her son to show up in the world. So in that moment, Mike, something shifted in me. I had spent years achieving titles, accomplishments, a resume that I thought was impressive on paper at least, but I realized that wasn't the thing. The thing was actually impact. The families whose lives were changed through the work I led during the housing crisis, or the young people who have found their footing because of my work with the Lewis Foundation after we invested in them, and my mother, who never had a corner office, but whose impact was so deep that people still talk about her. That's what I understood. And that's what I realized. Our greatest power isn't what we accomplish for ourselves, it's actually what becomes possible for other people because we have chosen to serve. And that, my friend, is why I call it superpower.
Excellent answer. And isn't it the best when you have people who talk to you about, your mom or your dad, and you're just like, oh man, like I love it. So don't, anyone who's out there who knows our parents, feel free to bring that up anytime you want because it makes us feel good. So even though we're certainly probably still mourning them and their loss, it does feel good when people say good things about them and all those good memories come flooding back. And here I am, like, picking apart the title of your book. But the second part of the subtitle, I think, is really important too, because you said the power of giving and receiving. So we all know that people are talking about giving through service. Yes, there's a lot of communities out there that need our help, and we 100% have that obligation to help them. That's the role that we take on when we put on those letters every single day. But what do we receive when we genuinely serve other people? That part is interesting to me.
It was interesting to me when I was trying to figure out how would I really try to explain a little bit of what that title really meant to me. And I landed on those words because there's a lot of research that shows the physiological effects of giving and the benefits we experience when we know that we actually matter. I'm not here to discuss the science of it though. I leave that to the capable scientists. What I can speak to is what I've witnessed and what I have experienced. When we genuinely serve others, we receive something that is deeply human, purpose. We're reminded that our lives actually do matter, that our gifts have real value, and that what we carry can make a difference in someone else's life. And it doesn't always come back immediately, Mike. It doesn't always come back in the form we sometimes expect. But service has a way of recalibrating us. It quiets the noise. It takes us outside of ourselves and remind us of who we really are. And when you serve, I believe something remarkable happens. You grow, you heal, and you become more than you were before. And that's the real superpower I'm after. Because we often think the power of service is what we give to someone else, but there's also something being created inside of us in the process. And that's what I want people to receive.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing for sure. When I hear the undergraduates talking about doing service, sometimes they kind of talk about it in a way where it's like forced upon them, basically saying, "Oh, I have to do service today." I want to look at that, right? Because we collectively we perform millions of hours of community service in fraternity and sorority life. But sometimes it just becomes like this thing that you check the box that, oh, I did my required hours this semester. We need 10 hours of service this semester. How do we move college students from required service to meaningful service that they want to do?
Yeah. When I thought about, think about just the requirements I had when I was a young person too, it brings me to a thought. And recently, after looking at your body of work, Greek University was born from a hazing death at a college. You read that New York Times article and you turn your conviction into an organization. I turned mine into a foundation. We both took very personal beliefs and built something from it that will outlast the feeling we felt in those immediate moments. And I think that is the answer for this question. Required service is transactional. 10 hours here, check the box, move on. Students know the difference. They can feel when an organization is more invested in the hours logged than what actually happens in those hours that were logged. Meaningful service starts with a story, not a policy, not a requirement, a story. And when I tell students about my grandfather, Henry Height Jr., who had worked alongside others to establish a community center in a Black neighborhood in Little Rock, Arkansas, an area that had no youth center or activities for the community, no local health care was provided in the area, they don't feel required to do anything. They often feel called to do something because they can see that in themselves. They can see that one ordinary person's decision to show up created something that is lasting generations after him. So the shift happens when students stop asking, what do I have to do? And start asking the question, what happens if I do not show up? When it becomes personal, Mike, it really becomes meaningful. And that transition cannot be something we mandate. It has to be invited through story, and it has to be inspired through action and example.
Yeah. You bring up some amazing points. I absolutely think that we have an obligation to serve the communities that we are in. I mean, we are blessed. I mean, when we really sit back and think about that, the fact that we were able to go to college, the fact that we were able to join a fraternity or a sorority, these are things that not everybody just gets.
Exactly.
And so I think we have an obligation to put out our hand and help other people up to where we are. Like that's I think part of the deal, right?
Yes.
So I'm really glad that you said that. And maybe we should have started with this question earlier because, we should talk about definitions, right? I,
Yes.
I think that when we talk about, service, there's also something out there called philanthropy in fraternity and sorority life. And I think a lot of college students and even fraternity and sorority members, they get those two terms kind of mixed up. Can you help our audience in terms of separating the confusion between philanthropy and service?
Sure. I mean, I'll take my stab at it. So I would say this with love because I am a member of AKA, and obviously we do both as well. Philanthropy is what you give. Service to me is how you show up. I think they can exist together, but they are absolutely not the same thing. You can write a check and never once understand the person you're writing it for. You can also walk into a room with nothing in your hands and completely change what happens there. So I've watched numerous organizations raise extraordinary amounts of money for communities while never actually sitting at the table with anyone in that community. And I've also watched individuals with no budget at all transform neighborhoods because they showed up consistently. They learned people's names and they let the relationship they created lead them in their work. So the confusion matters because it lets people off the hook sometimes. If I wrote a check, I did my part. But service asks something different of us. It asks us to be present, to be inconvenienced sometimes. It, quite frankly, to let someone else's needs rearrange our schedule. That is a different kind of an ask. It's a different kind of philanthropy. It's quite different and it produces a different kind of leader in the process.
Beautifully said. Really nice. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about as well is the job market right now, especially for young people, especially for recent college graduates. It's not easy. I got a couple of kids that are in college right now. I'm just telling you from experience with these two kids, it is hard out there right now. So, knowing what you specialize in, talk to us about the leadership skills that college students can develop through service that they may not even realize, but future employers are looking for those skills.
Yeah, that's true. I think for me, it's summed up in one word: proximity. The ability to actually understand the people you're leading. Every organization I've ever led, from the John Lewis Foundation to the MLK Senior Collaborative to NACA, and the Medical College of Georgia Health, the leaders who succeeded were those who stayed close to the real work, not the ones who managed it from a comfortable distance. Service trains you to be in the room, to listen before you decide, to adjust your approach based on what is actually happening rather than what you assumed would happen. I believe currently, and having served as an employer, employers are desperate for that right now. They're losing people because their managers have never learned to see the people they manage. Service actually teaches you to see people first. And a leader who sees people first builds loyalty that no compensation package can manufacture. There is also resilience. When you have served people in real crisis, when you have looked at a family in the eye and helped them navigate something devastating, a small workplace frustration will not derail you in the same way. You have perspective that most people your age may not yet have. And that is priceless in a professional setting. And I think students need to be more sincere about serving because those experiences will help them in the leadership level and in the boardroom.
Fantastic news. Really good stuff. I'm a little jealous. I have to admit, I am jealous that you got a chance to work with John Lewis. I mean, what I would pay to have a day in that life is obscene. So you spent 2 years leading the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. So what did working to advance Congressman John Lewis's legacy teach you personally about leadership and service?
I will tell you, I had the extreme pleasure of meeting him in my 20s. And so coming to this organization, after his passing was really meaningful to me. And so I will tell you, John Lewis crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge knowing that he might not make it to the other side. That is not courage as an abstraction. That is a human being choosing absolutely to put people over his own safety in a very specific moment on a very specific day with very specific people watching. What that taught me about leadership is that legacy is not built in grand speeches. It is built in specific choices. And the beautiful thing is that John Lewis made one. Then he made another choice. Then he made another choice. And over his lifetime, those choices have added up to a very important movement that he supported. That work at the foundation that I got a chance to leave taught me personally that it's more powerful for a leader to do that than to make the mission bigger than themselves, which is what I learned about Congressman Lewis, more so from those who walked alongside him and have worked with him for years. John Lewis did not want people to follow him just because he was John Lewis. He wanted people to follow the idea that ordinary people could demand extraordinary justice in this country. The minute a leader makes the mission about themselves, it starts to really shrink. The moment they make it bigger than themselves, it starts to grow. And so I carried that into the writing of this book, Serving as a Superpower. It's not about me, it's about the idea that service is the most underutilized competitive advantage in leadership. I'm just the person who finally said it out loud. And I hope I said it in a way that people can hold on to it.
I hope everyone goes out and gets your book because I think that's absolutely incredible. The other thing that I wanted to to you about is AI. Right now, we hear about artificial intelligence all over the place, news articles everywhere. They're taking all of our jobs. Young people can't get hired because AI is replacing them. I mean, it's like it's all over the place. So college students today, yes, surrounded by technology, social media, their phones, artificial intelligence. But when I looked at all of the documents around your work, you actually make this provocative point that AI cannot teach us everything, particularly when it comes to discovering your purpose here in life. So, what are those human qualities that technology cannot replace?
Well, I first say presence, the willingness to be genuinely inconvenienced by another person's needs. AI can aggregate information, identify patterns, and generate language that sounds remarkably like understanding, but it cannot stay. When I stayed behind, with my staff after our national events for helping people with foreclosures, my local team really realized that I was there as a leader who realized and recognized the burden that we were leaving behind with them. And I didn't do it as I announced it. I just did not get on the plane that day. And I stayed behind and helped my team process thousands of files to make sure people did not lose their homes to foreclosure. And what the team saw was that their leader believed their burden was worth her time. No algorithm produced that. No chatbot created that trust that I endeared in my staff. What technology cannot replace is that decision that you make when you decide to show up when it costs you something. That decision made consistently over time is what builds the kind of trust that make people move mountains for you. And it is entirely human. It requires a will that technology does not have. The choice to care when you could choose not to, that in itself is irreplaceable.
Nice. Really good. Well, you've given me something positive to think about instead of all the doom and gloom that I hear around AI. So that's good. Knowing who John Lewis was, you definitely understand what legacy means because you can see it and feel it and everything about his work. So when fraternity and sorority members talk about leaving a legacy in their chapter, what do you think a meaningful legacy actually looks like?
You know, I think it actually comes back to, how you live. And there is one particular story I share in my book where I talk about my grandfather. When he passed away, I was a baby. So I didn't have a chance to get the information about his life directly from him. Or so I learned a little bit here and there. And I did not have a chance for him to share those amazing stories directly. But years later, when I was in my 20s, I met a gentleman who was very well esteemed, Mr. William Sonny Walker. He was a civil rights activist who had served in a division under President Jimmy Carter. And upon meeting me and realizing who my grandfather was, he told me that my grandfather had been a mentor to him and that my grandfather had been instrumental in his life. Now, my grandfather never knew the community he served or the young man he mentored would go on, to serve the nation from that community. So that is to me what meaningful legacy looks like. It does not look like a building with your name on it, although that's very nice. It does not look like an award or recognition, although those are nice as well. But to me, it actually looks like a person decades later saying your name in a room you never entered because of something you quietly chose to do when you had nothing to gain from it. My mother never stood on stage, she never had a title or announced her greatness in any way. But I am standing here today because of what she chose consistently over a lifetime. And to me, that legacy of service is what I want. I want faithfulness, not famous.
Wow, very nicely said. And yeah, I mean, I think about that often. I think about legacy often. And I'm with you. I mean, if we can make positive changes in our community, then that's a beautiful legacy to have. If we could eliminate hazing in fraternities and sororities, what an amazing legacy that would be for
Absolutely.
future fraternity and sorority leaders. And you don't really know like who's listening or who's taking notes in a crowd of 4,000 people, right? You're just planting seeds, like just like crop dusting almost, right? You're planting all of these seeds and you have no idea which one is going to take. And this beautiful like oak tree is going to emerge, could be
Yeah.
20 years later, but you have no idea where it's coming from, right? You just spread it and hope.
That's right.
So I get what you're talking about. I think it was you really nicely summed it up. So I think that's great. Now, Deetra, all of our listeners want to become better leaders and better people. That's typically what you find in fraternities and sororities today. So, what is one act of service that somebody who's listening to this podcast today could do this week that might begin to change not only someone else's life, but also their own?
Hmm. Good question. I'm glad you asked because a lot of times we think of serving others as something we have to give up a lot or it takes a lot out of us. So I love your challenge. You want me to give you one thing. Okay. So I would say for the audience, Mike, call someone you know who is doing meaningful work and tell them that you see them, not a text message, not a reaction on one of their posts, a real phone call. Remember that? Because when people who show up every day without recognition, the advisors, the chapter presidents, the community volunteers, the mentors who stayed late, they often do not know their work is actually mattering. And they're running on faith and exhaustion a lot of times. And your one phone call that says, I see what you're doing and it's making a difference can carry a person through an entirely difficult season or a rough moment or when they're, almost too exhausted to keep going. And to me, that is how simple service is. It costs you nothing but attention and intention. And the reason it changes your life too is because the moment you genuinely see someone else, you stop being the center of your own story. And that shift from being the main character to being genuinely present with another person, that is where purpose actually lives. So I challenge everyone, do that this week. One call, one person, and mean it. And then notice what happens inside of you once you put the phone down
Hmm.
or click it off.
That's pretty awesome. Just yesterday, I posted something really vulnerable on social media, and then all of a sudden, I got a message from one of my fraternity brothers, one of my chapter brothers, that I literally have not spoken to this guy in like 10 years, and he
Wow.
just he just sent a note, sent a message, basically saying, "Mike, I'm proud of you," and that was it. It was it. And it's just like, what? I hadn't heard from that guy in 10 years.
Amazing. I hope he hears this podcast so he can hear you say
I
that.
hope
That's
so.
awesome.
I
Because
hope
you
so.
have you are really beaming from that. I can tell.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. It was definitely pretty awesome. And yeah, the fact that I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years, I'm like, that's what you had to say to me. All right. I take that.
Exactly.
I will take that as a win today.
Wonderful.
All right. So, Dietra, really important. If our listeners want to bring you in to speak on their college campus or they want to buy your book, where should they go in order to get all of these things?
Absolutely great question. So, very easy. Servingisasuperpower.com. The website has all the information, all of our contacts, and things are there for you. And I'm super excited to share that once they get there, they can find something also that'll help them go deeper, a new workbook that's like a personal journey for them to actually put this in real action. But absolutely, I look forward to being on college campuses and speaking to groups. And find me at servingisasuperpower.com. I'm ready to connect and ready to meet your audience.
There you go. Serving is a superpower.com. Go to the website, go and check out Deetra's workbook. Make sure you get that. Go and buy her book on Amazon and all the places. So that way you can read about all of the stuff and bring it to your campus too. Because, I mean, come on, who's talking about this stuff? I mean, Deetra's here. So, I mean, just call her.
Absolutely.
Let's make that happen. Deetra, you are just a breath of fresh air. So thank you so much for being here on the show, sharing everything that you learned in terms of service. And I just think what you're doing is awesome. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. It's great being with you.
All right. To our audience, if you learned something today, and I know that you did because I learned like 10 things from Deidre today. So please share this episode with your entire fraternity or sorority chapter. Grab the link and put it in a group chat or just share it on social media so that way everybody in your chapter can hear what Detria said today, because you never know who needs to hear this message. Thank you to our listeners. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.